Greetings. This is the Chicago Bungalow Report, coming to you from Chicago, Illinois, former lands of the Potawatomi Indian tribe, now home to a diverse, multicultural metroplex of over 6 million people. My name is Jerry Haderlein, and I am joined by my producer, Jerry Haderlein Jr. Today we are here to present you the Chicago Bungalow Report, which we divide into 3 segments every time we come on. The first segment is the Chicago Housing Report. Our second segment is the Chicago Cultural Report. And our third segment is known as Tales from the Great Northwest Side of Chicago. So let's start our first segment, which is the Chicago Housing Report. The current market in the city, that would be the city proper and the suburbs too at this moment, could be accurately described as leaning towards a buyer's market. Buyer's market. I wouldn't call it a severe buyer's market, but if you could imagine a dial with an arrow in the middle, one side being buyer's market, the other side being seller's market, the arrow would be pointing, let's say, a degree, maybe 5 degrees to the right on the buyer's market. There's a few reasons why. Number one, there's been an overall downturn in sales volume in certain parts of Chicago, particularly in the segment of the luxury home market. On Chicago's north side, we have quite a few luxury homes that are sitting on the market with longer market times. The houses that have been priced in the more mid-range, when we say mid-range in Chicago, we're talking about a house with an average price of somewhere in the $300,000 to $350,000 range. If you're outside of Chicago, that sounds like an awful lot of money, but when you're inside Chicago, in the Chicago market, it's a very mid-range price. You could even stretch that to $450,000. So let's call that $300,000 to $450,000 mid-range. That market is seeing steady strength, and I would call that market more of a even market between buyers and sellers, maybe even leaning a little towards sellers on that side. Only because people tend to be, I think, trends will show a little more conservative right now in their buying habits. They don't seem to be reaching for the luxury home as in years past, and that wasn't so far past either. You know, we're talking, this is the end of 2017. The 2014, 15, 16 markets were strong in the luxury home category. Now there is a little bit of a downturn there. I've spoken to some realtors who have some very fine luxury homes on the north side of Chicago, between Lakeview and Lincoln Park in that area, Roscoe Village. Some of these homes have had some very long market times. They're beautiful, gorgeous homes, priced in the $1.5 to $2.2 million range. They have everything you could ever want and more. However, they're very expensive, and so they sit longer, and sometimes they just don't sell until the prices come down, until the developers or the owners reduce the prices. So what are some of the reasons that other reasons that the market is behaving the way it is right now? Well, we do have some upward pressure in interest rates at the moment. The 30-year fixed non-jumbo is trending right around 4% at the moment, which is higher than what we've been looking at for the last, let's say, 5 years. It is just beginning to spike up slightly. There is some talk that the rates may fall again. The jumbo rates are about the same. The 15-year rate is lower. You can probably get a 15 right now, somewhere in the 3.35, certainly 3.5 range at this point. So it's still a really good deal if you can afford to accelerate your payments and go for a 15-year. Um, all in all, these rates are still really good. These rates, if you were to compare this to a historical uh, average trend going back even 15 years, now you're looking at um, still a very, very low interest rate by comparison to, say, 15 years ago, where the rates were probably averaging somewhere in the 6% range. So, an interest is always, in most every case, the largest expense component of a mortgage, the interest alone. Um, so it's important that rates stay where they are and don't go up too much higher, because if they do, it will have a negative impact on the real estate values in, in the whole country, but certainly in the Chicago area. So let's talk about now. I'd like to talk about some factors in the city right now that are important factors to consider when, if you're thinking of moving to Chicago, or if you live here already. Currently, younger people who are in the city, or people moving in, certainly younger people who have come to the city, professionals, who, by the way, make very good money in the city of Chicago if they land a job, um, uh, choosing to rent rather than to buy. It's an interesting set of reasons why this is happening. But I suspect that one of the reasons is that someone who's making very good money, who's just starting their job, doesn't have the kind of down payment, or necessarily feels they have the job security, even though they're doing well, um, to make the decision to buy in Chicago, so they can get everything that someone who buys a condominium gets and more by simply renting. Instant access to luxury living. Just pay the rent and you got it. And there's plenty of that in Chicago. Plenty of well-located, nice buildings in the downtown area, which give you nice views of the city, access to transportation, access to great restaurants and entertainment, and there's even several venues for sports that are in the Loop area now. There's naturally the United Center, where the Bulls and the Blackhawks play, and there's quite a few college games out there these days too. And then there's the new Wintrust Arena that was built by DePaul University in partnership, I believe, with the McCormick Place down at 22nd and Michigan Avenue. Very, very beautiful stadium that just went in there. They're having more than just DePaul basketball there. Concerts. It's a nice concert venue. I saw the band Chicago play there roughly 3 weeks ago. The acoustics were good. The band was good. And I went there with Jerry Jr., his friend Ed, and my other son Tom. And I think the consensus opinion was that it was a good place to see a concert. Wouldn't you say, Jerry?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, and it's connected to the new Marriott Hotel right there, which is a gorgeous building. Also connected to the parking lot via an enclosed ramp. So that plus across the Lakeshore Drive, we have the Soldier Field venue, and so there's many things down in the area, including umpteen workout places. I think every big building has its own workout room. In addition to that, there's some tremendous gyms. East Bank Club is one of them that are close by that people use to work out, exercise, compete, whatever they want to do in these nice places. So we're we're looking at a good trend, a real good trend in Chicago right now. It's an upward trend of building, upward trend of people moving in, and a steady pace to the real estate market right now. If rates stay about where they are right now, there is no reason in the world that the city is going to keep on the path of vitality and growth in the coming years. Welcome back to segment 2 of the Chicago Bungalow Report. This is Jerry Haderlein Sr., joined by Jerry Haderlein Jr., our producer. Our second segment is entitled the Chicago Cultural Report. Question is, what is Chicago culture? Well, Chicago culture is a broad definition, which it probably has as many definitions as there are people in Chicago area. But to talk about the culture of Chicago, there would need to be a certain amount of commonality that needs to be covered. What is common in Chicago? What do Chicagoans experience together that is unique? What characteristics are there about Chicagoans as people which are unique as opposed to other places? Why do people come to Chicago and how do they change when they get here? How do they change when they leave here? Is that an effect of the Chicago culture? My guess is yes. There are things that are native to and driven by certain aspects of Chicago life that create what we would call a Chicago culture. So let's start with something really basic. Let's start with our weather. The Chicago weather it contributes a great deal to the Chicago culture. We have a upper Midwest climate, which is characterized by 4 seasons, moderate seasons. Three of the seasons are moderate. That would be spring, summer, and fall. Fall being in Chicago typically gorgeous in terms of scenery and climate and weather. We've experienced some beautiful falls in the last 5 or 10 years in particular. Followed by our most unfavorite season, which is winter. Winter in Chicago can be extremely harsh. Sometimes it can be not so harsh, but the winter of 2015-16 was a harsh winter. The winter of 2014-15 was a harsh winter. What do I mean by harsh? We define harsh not only as cold in Chicago, we define harsh as cold and snowy. We had the combination of cold and snow both of those winters. We had some very bone-chilling colds that got down below zero, sustained colds of below zero for days at a time, high winds, big snows. And in a crowded metropolitan area like Chicago, this causes untold problems. And this becomes unique to Chicago because, as many people know, Chicago is the largest metropolitan area in a northern Midwest climate. Minneapolis is a big town, but nowhere near as big as Chicago. And Milwaukee is a decent-sized town with similar climate experiences. However, nowhere near as big as Chicago. Chicago's huge. Chicago's a big place. Chicago's a crowded place. Chicago's an old place with narrow streets, narrow alleys, and limited amounts of snow-moving equipment. There's only so much of that can be employed during snowstorms, and it gets more burdensome with more frequent and heavier snowstorms. Cold is a little easier to manage, but still has its problems. I would say that one of the major problems with our extreme colds is the effect it has on poor people whose gas bills aren't paid, whose furnaces don't work well, whose houses are not insulated or sealed as well as others, and therefore experience some miserable conditions on these nights that are extremely cold. It's not too unusual in Chicago to hear stories about a house fire that breaks out because of a fire that breaks out from a non-traditional source of heat, like an oven or a small wall unit furnace, or even people have sometimes tried to warm their houses with fires in the fireplace and things like that. And as a result, there's many tragic fires in Chicago during the winter time that result sometimes in deaths because people are resorting to cheap, non-traditional ways of heating their homes. It's very sad, but it's a truth. It's a reality. These things happen more frequently during the colder days and the more brutal winters that we have. So this is a Chicago experience. These are Chicago experiences, and our climate plays a big part in these episodes. So, but we can shift over to our nicer climate experiences, which occur in the summertime and in the fall. Now, Chicago has become a very, very popular tourist destination worldwide. We have a tremendous downtown tourist attraction known as Millennium Park, which was a result of a huge investment in the late 1990s, early 2000s by the city of Chicago and some local private interests who cooperated to convert the old Illinois Central train area and some adjoining lands around it, and build an infrastructure and a structure on which they put a park, a huge park, many acres, right in the downtown area, right on Michigan Avenue, between Michigan Avenue and Lakeshore Drive. And today it's the number one tourist attraction in the city of Chicago, that and Navy Pier. Those two places, which are roughly half a mile from each other, have become tourist attractions for the entire city. And they work because they're beautiful, number one, and fun to go to and visit, to have your picture taken, and they have good restaurants and things like that. But they also work because our climate in the city of Chicago in the summertime is very nice. It's quite nice. We usually don't have too many 90-degree days. Very unusual to have a 90-degree day anymore in Chicago. So most of the time the temperatures wind up in the 80s, and which is very comfortable and allows for people to walk around the city, downtown, and there's plenty of hotel space downtown, so people can stay there. There's plenty of good transportation, be it by train or by cab or by Uber, to get people around and see the city at large. One of the more popular things that people do these days is they take the river cruises along the Chicago River. There are cruises that will take you up and down the river and are conducted by experts in Chicago architecture, and they will give guided tours along the riverfront of the history of the skyscrapers in Chicago, which are beyond remarkable. The skyscraper in Chicago is historically groundbreaking, going back to the late 1800s when Adler and Sullivan and those people were building these tremendous buildings. But we also have today's buildings, which are just magnificent, and there's many being built at the moment. There was an article in Chicago Tribune architecture section just before the big architecture expo that just got done in Chicago, just finished, which is an incredible expo. That has reported that there are 40 cranes right now in the greater Loop area that are up building high-rise buildings in the greater Loop area. 40, that's a big number. There's a lot of apartment buildings being built, a lot of condos being built. There's a lot of housing that is still being added to the already very vital downtown residential mix and market. The city is supporting this with jobs. There are enough jobs to go around. The city supports this with good infrastructure, and the city supports this with really wonderful entertainment. We do have a great amount of Broadway quality plays, probably unparalleled music scene in Chicago with everything from Chicago blues to country to progressive rock. Well, some people might say there's some underground rock, whatever you want to call it, to mainstream things. It's all here, and it's all very accessible, and none of it's particularly expensive. We have a great opera, Lyric Opera Chicago, and probably one of the top orchestras in the entire world, the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, all in the downtown area. So if you live downtown or near downtown, you are literally minutes away from these things. These are great amenities in the city. They speak well of our city and contribute mightily to what we would call the Chicago cultural scene. So that's it for today's Cultural Report. We'll be back with segment 3 in a minute. Welcome back to the Chicago Bungalow Report. This is Jerry Haderlein, Sr., along with Jerry Haderlein Jr., our producer. Our third segment is entitled Tales from the Great Northwest Side of Chicago. So why do I call this segment Tales from the Great Northwest Side of Chicago? Well, the reason is I grew up on the northwest side of Chicago and lived most of my life on the northwest side of Chicago. Spent time on the north side too, but essentially my cultural orientation is northwest side. I live here now, enjoy it now, and there's some old stories that I have that are entertaining, and I think they could give you a little idea of what Chicago culture is like based on just some of the stories I can tell. One of which is the story of Milwaukee Avenue. Milwaukee Avenue is the largest street on the north side that runs from downtown Loop, which would, when we say Loop, that's the downtown area, and it cuts on a northwest diagonal continuously all the way up to the city borderline in Niles, and it continues to stretch all the way up to the Wisconsin border. But we'll confine ourselves right now to the part that's on the northwest side of Chicago. So I want to talk about what is there now, what was there 40 years ago, and some of the interesting characteristics about it. Milwaukee Avenue has always been characterized by its Polish ethnic character. for whatever reasons, the Polish immigrants going way back, well over 100 years, found Milwaukee Avenue as a commercial center, and built their churches and established their neighborhoods along Milwaukee Avenue over the years, and therefore put their ethnic identity on Milwaukee Avenue. A lot of that in the inner city, that would be down in the areas that are older, more towards the downtown, have lost that identity or losing that identity today. But more on the northwest side, and certainly when you stretch into Niles and beyond, it's still very, very Polish. A lot of Polish stores, restaurants, taverns, businesses, professional services, etc. It's very common to see Polish script writing, wording on the outsides of buildings and buildings that house professionals on the northwest side along Milwaukee Avenue. But one of my stories I like to tell is a story of the food scene, the fast food scene back in the 70s. I myself worked at McDonald's located at Milwaukee and Elston, which was kind of in the middle of the two rivals at that time, big rivals at that time for fast food dollars. The biggest and most well-known is Superdog. Superdog is located at Milwaukee and Devon. Superdog has this iconic look, feel, taste, reputation, history in the Chicago area. If you drive by or even Google it, you'll see the Superdog logo, which is the Superdog and his girlfriend, and he's flexing, and he's a Superman, but he's a dog, so he's a hot dog who looks like he's a Superman. He's trying to be a Superman. Food is very good. They have a drive-up service window. They'll come to your car window and give you a car hop service. Still going on there at the corner of Milwaukee and Devon. And they've opened a second location up in Wheeling, also on Milwaukee Avenue, keeping with the Milwaukee Avenue theme. The rival in the old days was a location further down south on Milwaukee Avenue, roughly the 5300 block, and this was known as Tasty Hasty. Now, Tasty Hasty was different, but it was a very, very popular place, different in the sense that it probably reflected what a lot of people today call the Chicago hot dog. And by Chicago hot dog, I mean the hot dog that has everything on it. But Tasty Hasty didn't just put a lot of different things on it. They put a lot of different things on it. So you would have like a salad which had a hot dog in the middle. That's when you ordered a Tasty Hasty dog. It was just tremendous amount of everything: lettuce, tomato, onion, pickle, peppers, in great quantities. It was massive. If you didn't have big hands, you couldn't hold it. I mean, if you didn't have a big mouth, you couldn't bite it. It was just they're just so big. It was a thing unto itself that fell. Or you had to have napkins everywhere because they'd fall all over your car if you were eating in the car. It was a big mess all the time. But it was cool. It was fun, and you really felt like you're getting a lot for your money. Unfortunately, they went out of business roughly 20 years ago, maybe even 25. Superdog still remains, and so does the McDonald's that I used to work at. They've rebuilt the entire structure, and which in a way is kind of sad because I had a lot of fun at the old McDonald's working there. I started there for $1.60 an hour in 1973, and I got a raise after about 3 months to $1.65, which was a raise, but it wasn't what I consider a generous raise. The work was hard. You're on your feet the whole time. If anybody has ever worked fast food, they know it's a lot of work, and you're doing more cleaning than you are cooking when you work at a McDonald's store. It's clean, clean, clean. cook a little bit, then clean some more. You know, you got to clean everything, including the grill at the end of the night, which has been on all day at 400 degrees, and it's black as coal. And you, at the end of the night, we couldn't walk out of there without shining it up to where there wasn't a speck of any kind of burnt ash or burnt grease on the grill. It had to be shiny before we left. That entailed a lot of scrubbing, a lot of at the end of the evening, things like that. So, but McDonald's was hard, even though it was hard work. We had a lot of fun working with the other kids who worked there, the other 16-year-olds, most of whom went to Taft High School, which is the local public school on the northwest side there. And I got to be friendly with them, even though I didn't go to Taft. I went to Loyola Academy in Wilmette. But I made some friends, and we shared a lot of laughs, and had a lot of fun as we worked, and made burgers for the people on the northwest side of Chicago. So that's a little story about Milwaukee Avenue, the local food scene on Milwaukee Avenue, and we'll be back next time with our second show. Hope you join us. Thank you. Great God in heaven, you know I love